So I'd like to introduce one of the contemporaries, Lisa Wöhrle, who's going to introduce the artists, and I'd like to welcome them.
Thank you, Betty, for the introduction, and our thanks to Carol Potterborny and the entire amazing staff here at McMaster Museum of Art for the opportunity to reunite here in the place where it all started for us over 35 years ago. We feel so warmly welcomed and honored to be presenting the Contemporaries. This must be the place here at McMaster. Next slide. Yeah. So first let me start by introducing our group. The Contemporaries are Paul Cvetich, Paul Ropel-Morski, Judi Burgess, Janice Kovar, Raffaele Caterini, John Kinsella, Ferdinando, or Fred Bilanzola, and myself, Lisa Wöhrle. And I invite you to read the beautiful blue brochure for individual bios and statements, as well as the introductory text by Fiona Kinsella and Paul Lisson from Hamilton Arts and Letters, because we think it beautifully captures the zeitgeist of the Mac Art Studios of the 80s and how we came to be. So for the talk today, I'll start by sharing a bit about the early days of the Contemporaries and what has brought us here to reunite in 2023. And then I'll turn it over to each of the 7 artists here today to share a few words about the work with you. And each of us has 5 to 6 minutes, so we're gonna get right to it. So some of you were part of this story, so I'll just, but we're gonna just put it out there anyway. We all met here at MAC, and we have incredible memories of our time spent in the art studios. And this was a transformative time for us and really set us on a path, our life's path. When we were graduating from McMaster, we were determined to find a way to maintain that sense of community, that mutual support and friendship that we experienced in the studios. And we inspired each other, and we were determined to continue to make our work and to find ways to show it and really to make our mark. So by forming ourselves into a collective, we felt we could support each other, we could take risks and be stronger together. We became the young Contemporaries. The young part kind of got old pretty quickly, so we soon dropped it. 2 of us were already in our 30s by then, and for some reason we thought that didn't seem young anymore. But anyway, so we became the Contemporaries, and we exhibited together from 1986 to 1995. We started off with a core group of 7, yeah, you can move to the next slide, sorry. Yeah. Then, and now, and then the next slide. Yeah. So, yes, we started off with 7, we added an 8th, and we invited others to join us for various exhibitions during that period. So here's a few of the shots from that time. Go to the next slide. So we felt that commercial galleries and public galleries were not really an option for us. Somehow they weren't just coming to invite us to show. So we started off with independent DIY shows in alternative spaces and local spaces, including the Broadway Cinema and the iconic Hammer Gallery run by Denise Lasson and Jim Mullen. We took over a space for an exhibition on Vine Street off James North, before James North was actually a thing, by the way, and it was before the Hamilton Artists moved into that space. And in Toronto, we rented an empty gallery space in Yorkville, and we showed at the John B. Eyre Gallery. We were trying to make our inroads into the big city, too. We shared all the organizing, transporting work, expenses amongst the members of the group, installing, writing press releases, getting invitations printed and mailed, because that was a thing, picking up beer and wine for the opening nights, for the parties. There were a lot of parties, and some of you were there, I know. So as time went on, we were gaining momentum, and people started to pay attention to the Contemporaries. In 1992, when we presented the Season Desire exhibition at Broadway, which was Hamilton's repertory cinema, we got a full-color 2-page spread in the Hamilton Spectator, which is super cool. The article included a Contemporaries Who's Who. Our final exhibition as a group from that time was at the Grimsby Art Gallery in 1995. And this was our first show in a public art gallery until now, until today. So after the Grimsby show, we essentially disbanded. Each of us were following our own individual paths, whether that was showing as individual artists, whether that was working in galleries or arts admin, whether it was scenic painter, teachers, and of course parents. And so while we were not actively showing as a group, we absolutely remained supportive friends. And I do want to acknowledge that one of us is here only in spirit. At least I know. I hope in spirit, but I know in spirit. Our dear friend, Fred Bilanzola, died in a winter driving accident in 2001, and we miss him. So Fred's son, Cristiano, who holds his archive, helped bring Fred's work into this space with us. In 2015, Bryce Canberra hosted a 20-year reunion exhibition at his uni gallery on James North called Contemporaries, How Did I Get Here? And something magical we felt was magic that was happening once again when we all came together to be artists as well as friends. And that brings us now to 2023. This must be the place at the McMaster Museum of Art. So that's our little Contemporaries bio. And now over to the individual, so next slide is Janice. Yeah. So Janice is going to come in and
Great. Thank you very much, Lisa, and welcome everybody.
so you're going to just tell me what to say.
Okay, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces. Most of you are friends. I've come to many of our shows, so that's awesome. I was at Mac for sure, and I majored in sculpture and drawing when I was here, and continued on for many, many years, and taught as well, and just retired from teaching last year, so I've had the whole full year off now, so it's been wonderful to bring back that energy to teaching that I had and bring it back into the art sort of movements and concepts I'm working with. So it's been a continual process. Basically, I moved between sculpture and painting. These are some of the pieces that I've been in the show I've had previously. I take geometric forms. I'm working with urban spaces and landscape forms. A lot of time I'm using throwaway materials, disassembling pieces, putting them together. This is an Instagram shot of a post from 2022 of this is a very large painting, 36 by 36, to a very small painting of recycled materials. I take a lot of wood pieces that I find. I use a lot of surface components. I use stacking of materials. This is one of the first pieces I did actually that started off my whole series. It's a very pale blue, very small. I was just interested in the urban environment and encroachment issues and boundaries and lines and edges, and they're sort of half painting, half sculptural pieces that really focused my attention. Moved into a similar style and size, but added some other elements, which are wood strips with plaster, a lot of modeling paste. This is canvas. So it's just the idea of taking all of these materials that I really love to use and juxtapositioning them together. Then I started on same size, a little bit bigger. Some of these are in the show. They are floor tiles, linoleum. I just find things that are banal that everybody has, that these things are all over the place, and try to elevate it. So that's part of just using things that people have and find all around, and then trying to create like a sculptural form that is elevated into a different perspective, so we see things differently. And so people it's not my job to like tell you what the art, what you should think about it, but it is really just for you. Everybody has their own interpretation. So this is a very large painting, same idea, but 36 by 36. These are just canvas pieces that I've painted on, but I also have figured out how to create my own sort of rough surfaces on canvas board where I take wax and then I paint and layer it up and then I rip it off and then I turn it over and then I use the back of it and then I just like stack, like you name it, I've done it. In terms of materials, I'm really process driven, so if it's a really interesting, cool material, I try to find a way to stick it in there. And I've done things with magazines, and I don't like to put like pictures in because I feel that it's too much of trying to focus you on what it could be rather than just letting it be. But I do love drawing, and I can't stop myself from putting in shapes and architectural forms on top of things that I've done. So this is like floor tile. This is just a small thing. It was pink because at the time I was working at Art Aggregate, I was cutting out all these wood boxes and things and working with all these guys around me who were making these like large cabinets and things, and I was just there doing my little sculpture. So it was just like a play on pink and woodworking and tools and trying to make it look like I knew what I was doing, first of all, but also just working with the materials to try to bring out that feminine side, sort of balancing masculine and feminine. So, and then the layering. This is a whole series I did at Cotton Factory. I have a studio there, and I have had a studio there for 5 years. And these are all just very small, little sculptural pieces. They're kind of relief, but not really, where I've taken the backs of paintings, surface material, and then I always have to put it in some sort of geometric context because that's how I work. It's all kind of fragmented, distorted lines and edges, trying to create my own visual language, and that's how I interpret the world and the world around me, and I'll also add material and fabrics in, layer up the surfaces. This is a painting I did probably during the pandemic. I was, no, actually last year, but it's really just texture and surface. It's about this big, and this is a still life. Some people see a still life in it, and that's great. This is sort of plant material and organic shapes, lots of modeling paste, I do a lot of scraping and layering and digging back out of the surface of things to try to reveal. So it's a lot about revealing as it is about painting something. This is a show from Earl's Court Gallery that I just had in October, which was very exciting. I was part of a show called Urban Edge, and it was myself and 3 other artists from Toronto and Hamilton area who were selected to talk about the encroachment of the environment of living near an urban center and what that means, and how artists, whether they're painting the industry or Hamilton or gritty city Hamilton, what that looks like. And for me, again, it all comes back to working with these shapes, manipulating them. This is the painting that is out there. So when I do big paintings, I tend to go big, and you have to work differently when you work big. So it's a lot of embedding, a lot of drawing and hiding. Could be map making or little bits of map. Mark Bradford was a really big influence. If you know his work, he is social abstraction. So you can be an abstract artist and also say things with your abstraction. So sometimes that's a big interest. It's not just to look good or be pretty or to, just look nice on a wall. I do like the work sometimes, not always, but most of the time to have some other meaning to it. And then, of course, this is the show for McMaster that's over here now. So it's really nice to see them as like an installation. I have thought about these pieces for the last 2 years when I had to commit to Mac to what kind of work I was going to do. At the time, I was doing these pieces, these box-like things. And during the pandemic, I was going to say earlier, I got very tight. I don't know, as a way of controlling the pandemic and how I was feeling. I was doing a lot of very geometric, linear things as a way, I feel, to just make sense of what was happening during the pandemic. And so I've kind of moved away from that. They're a bit looser because I don't feel as if I'm, we're just sort of moving all, hopefully, into a better spot from that. So these are those pieces that relate to that.
I'm the timekeeper.
Yes, I know. I think that's
I've assembled a group of slides that is basically what I've done in the last 40 years since I left here. This is a painting called Slow. It's very reminiscent of the work I was doing when we first started forming the Contemporaries. And it was in 1988 we had our first show, Lisa, not 1986. And it was at Mohawk College, and it was a really random thing. We were, I was walking in the market, I met Joan Arcart. She said, you want a show? And I said, I don't want a show, but we can throw a group together really quickly. And Joan was in that group too. Anyhow, that painting was from one of the first ones. This is from the last show we had in 1995, working. And it's, a lot of people think it's a prostitute, but it's not. Judi and I had moved into a studio in between the Carlton House and the Balmoral, which was, if you live in Hamilton, you probably know what I'm talking about. But the police used to set up dragnets there. And you would, and they would catch the John. So you would have a police officer, who the woman is, catching people. Anyhow, that's what the painting's about. And then Fred died. And I did a bunch of death paintings because we had a bunch of people die at the time. And this one's a good friend of mine, Danny Hewitt, who's my oldest friend in the world. He passed away, and this is called Dan's Day. It's about fishing experiences we had, because we always went fishing together. And after he passed, all his friends and I went fishing for a weekly basis for probably like a month. So this is out in the piers in Hamilton, underneath the Skyway, where the lighthouse is. This is for Fred and Dan. It's called Gone, and I think it's, empty chairs are reminiscent of death to me, so I think it's kind of self-explanatory. I love those guys. First painting I did, this painting is from the opening show of You, Me at Bryce Canberra. And I put it in because I think Hamilton's got this thing about constructed pieces, I think. Paul does them, Janice does them, Bryce Canberra does them, I do them, Jim Mullen did them, Doug Carter. I mean, there's a huge group of people doing constructed pieces, and that's why I threw that one in. Another constructed one, a small frame of time. I worked in theater for years. That's how I made my money painting. And there was always a group of guys that would find interesting objects for me and throw them at me. And this was from Andy Pittman, a really good friend of mine. He ran a CNC machine, and we would do all kinds of tests for people all over the world. And a lot of those tests would end up in the garbage, and I would always be there using stuff. So, okay, and then then we went to Europe a few times, and I think I changed my painting. I started considering my paintings conversations with artists and history. And this painting was, I think we were at the Louvre in Paris, and the Islamic Center had just opened up, and it absolutely blew me away. And tons of paintings came out of that. This is probably the first one. And again, the square circle. These came out of Florence, I think. They hark back to Leonardo, that whole Infinite Man, and anyhow. Barcelona, again, I had the great joy of being in Barcelona with our good friend Jim Mullen, who recently passed away. And the Mediterranean sky is blue. And it's just that simple. That's what I'm trying to get. It's a sense of blue that you just do not get here. So. Blood test. I had a lot of blood tests that year. And and I was thinking about myself and what the hell was going to happen, but it all seemed to work out. And these I kind of call my pre-pandemic paintings. I showed these in February, March of 2020, just as the pandemic was coming, and they kind of are almost precursors to me when I look at them now, in the sense of the lines. Okay.
So oh my I think I. Thanks, Judi. Okay. Boy,
left, so I'm like scripted here. Yay.
No, I said, okay, Judi.
Okay. Well, I'm just going sort of through a history of my work from back in those days to now. So a lot of my work in the early days with Contemporaries featured strong female protagonists. Their states of mind emphasized by the presence of other symbols. I begin to get interested in adding multiple images in the background to add meaning, texture, and to distort varying picture planes. The linear motif you see here communicates something unique to each painting. So here it's sort of like thoughts in a dream. Here it's basically the act of creation. And sorry,
Yeah, just let me know.
here it's sort of like an alien language or an ancient language. Also, I'm obsessed with painting twins and mirror images, so you'll probably see a lot of those today. I did this series, it was probably one of my first solo shows other than printmaking shows. The first painting show I did as a solo. And since I was interested in using symbolic language, the idea of tarot cards intrigued me. The timeless fortune-telling practice goes back to the mid-15th century. And the format allowed me to create some scenarios incorporating all the things that I loved at the time. Sense of historical imagery, strong figures and animals, detailed symbols. I do obsess over detail. Decorative elements, and lots of color, which is a thing I can't get away from, it seems. In 1995, I began to make paintings on furniture almost exclusively for over 10 years. I liked the idea of art that was functional, and I was intrigued by the challenge of transforming uniquely shaped pieces into three-dimensional paintings. I was using a lot of imagery from the zodiac and playing cards at the time in various mediums because I love the playfulness, the mixed patterns and colors that these images invite. And since furniture could be viewed from all angles, twins seem to worked well. Oh wait, we're not there yet.
No, sorry. I'll wait for you.
Oh no, I guess, yeah, we are there.
No,
Okay, we're there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just
We're
love
there.
you so much, I wanted to spend some time on it.
So it should be bait though. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, that's why that didn't quite work together. But anyway, in 2006, animals became the main or supporting characters in the work. Animals could represent so many varying ideas that I could play with in the compositions. Okay, now you can put Plus, I liked elevating these humble animals to something to be celebrated. So I did quite a few giant insects, for example. I began making small sculptures coated with paper mache, and larger pieces like this one inevitably emerged. I loved the challenge of building pieces in the round, and this medium also allowed me to do some painting, and I could add other types of materials with it. Metal stands were given to me by a neighbor, and that gave me a way to build, they're fairly big, they're about this big, upright sculptures that kind of swayed a little bit. So they kind of look eerily lifelike. I had just created 3 fairy tale icon paintings because I'm intrigued by the dark drama in the age-old tales. And that led to a series of fairy tale victims, I call them, sculptures. Rapunzel here, she has 9-foot long hair. Somebody gave me a spool of this material, so I just wove it all, and yeah, it was actually quite a process. Oh, anyway, so this type of material worked really well for that subject, and I was pretty obsessed with the whole construction with paper mache medium. In 2015, collaboration with Liz Bates, who happens to be here, artist, costume designer, and tailor, came to fruition. And with our concept in place, I built and painted the sculptures, handed it off to Liz, and then she would do her magic with it. And it was pretty magical how our aesthetics matched very well. This is another one from the series. So I built the series to be somewhat bendable and movable, so that Liz and I could capture the sculptures in some animations, stop motion animations that we made then. Unfortunately, we couldn't get them on to work today with the PowerPoint, but anyway, yeah, I was really obsessed with the stop motion thing. Liz was very tolerant. It took us many, many hours to move things an inch at a time. Anyway, it was fun, and it was cool to see our sculptures come alive. In 2019, so this is the work in the show, I began to explore the idea of hand gestures as universal forms of communication. So I moved from single hand explorations to two hands, to the handshake was really the original impetus for this piece. And the handshake prompted me to think about politicians and real world issues like the slowness of progress in tackling climate change. So the scene here depicts the consequences of inaction. Politicians from differing factions finally come to an agreement, but it is, however, too late. Octopi 2 was inspired by the clapping gesture, and I imagined a room full of rallying extremists who seemed blind to seeing the bigger picture, making progress virtually impossible. The crowd cheers on their leader, seemingly oblivious to the fact that their platform is allowing the creation of the very monster that's about to devour them. Monster. That's okay.
So we can click through these?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I discovered, well, can we just show the first one?
Yeah.
So I was playing around with the drawings from Octopi 2, and I noticed, like, because I used tracing paper to transfer drawings onto the painting surface, that when I reversed things around, it made a whole completely different picture. So I did a lot of playing around with hand gestures and faces and doubling up the faces, reversing the faces, and we can just go through these. Which led to this, and the next one is, right? And then now we're looking at the work in the show. This one's called Alive. So I enjoyed trying to paint these faces melding together. It was really quite a challenging thing, and I had no idea how I was going to go about it in the first place. But I really just liked the dynamic that it created, doubling up the faces like that. A lot of people think I found enlightenment, but that's not actually the case. Anyway, so in these paintings, the hands begin to mean different things. This one is more about community and kindness and nurturing. The previous one is more about like ideas going relentlessly through your mind and like insomnia type of thing, which I had last night. Okay, this is the last one. Yeah, no, we're good. And the last one, yeah. So again, twins, obsession. But this one it sort of became to me something to do with the bounty of the earth, and then I started thinking about how the toll that takes on the earth, and that's why it's called We Reap What We Sow. That's it. John.
As the morning mist clears, the mystic island, barely visible, appears to hover somewhere between the sky and water. The mysterious shapes of trees melt together in a mirage of atmospheric gymnastics. Like a ghost ship, Mystic Island is the last land before the vast, seemingless, endless sea. This will be as far as we go today. Tomorrow we will venture into the unknown, to the other side. Hope. A new day is upon us. The storm abides, the water calms, peace is restored. The young maple stands firm on the lake of Two Rivers shore. Hope is all around us. Change is in the air. Nothing stays the same in the perpetual motion machine. The young maple is turning, summer green to autumn hue. The season shifts. The hope of a new day The moon carries night's cloak, disappearing over lost horizons. Here comes the sun. Warmth and light transforms the resilient maple. A new day is upon us. Hope. Now I'm painting landscapes. I've been painting landscapes for the last 10 years or so. Before, back in the day, this would be an example of one of the paintings that it's kind of typical of what I would do. It was kind of social commentary, sort of a young person bombarded with all the news and state of the world and trying to make sense of everything. So you would have like your priests and your little boys and everybody's, like your doctors and everybody was being accused of everything. And meanwhile, we were trying to fit into this and figure out where we were. Also looking back at coming out of McMaster, we had a strong art history background. And so we've got like the Raft of the Medusa, the Jericho painting, and sort of kind of reaching back, you can go to the next one, reaching into art history and again, trying to contemporize it, trying to make sense of it, trying to bring it into the time that we were living in. Here's us. Lisa and I got married. So we would travel through Europe, and of course we'd hit all the museums and the Gaudi, the Sagrada Familia, and again, just try to make sense of all this history and bring it into what can I make of it? Where do I fit in all this? And then that sort of led to where we can now see some of this landscape idea coming in. And the beginning of that whole environmental movement that is everywhere now. We were kind of in the early gestation period of that, and to stand out and speak up for the landscape, everybody's like, what the heck are you talking about? We got other things going on in the world right now. But that movement obviously took off and well surpassed anything that I could do. Daylight rushes out like a warm exhale. I stand transfixed by the chaotic tumult of rhapsodic color, chromosynthesis. The sun sizzles on the horizon. A char of impenetrable shadow approaches silently from behind. The verdant world dissolves into cool night's embrace. The river flows, a force unstoppable, changing everything in its path, a source of life itself, powerful, courageous, defiant. Stay on the trail, stay on the path. The forest is transforming. Light breaks through, the poplar glows golden. Change is all around. The path is uphill, the air is cooler. Now down to the river. The days are shorter, colors shift. Autumn's arrival. Follow the path to the end. So we have been, after starting painting again in 2010, my children, Camille's here, and were old enough to kind of take care of themselves, and so we picked up the brush, and we would take the kids to Algonquin, and the same thing would happen when I was a kid, and all of the stresses and all the pressures of the world would just disappear. So at least you can just flip through these. So Algonquin has been really my muse for the last few years, and here's a few pictures from Algonquin Park, and we'll just end with a couple of these Algonquin pieces. Okay, hold on. Wait. Okay, so here, on the rocky shore, I stand and stare. As deepest blue transforms the air. The horizon melts into evening's hue. Earth, sea, and sky in deepest blue. So deep the blue, so deep and wide, so deep the water and sky divide. The lapping waves, the rocky shore, into the blue, the deepest blue, into the night's elusive hue, somehow made me think of you.
So I'm a figurative painter, and thinking about why do I do this? I think of myself as a people person, as a person who needs people. I have always been fascinated by and considered myself somebody who just observes. And in my early figurative paintings, this was expressed as observing the energy of the scene that I was a part of in the 90s. So we can move forward. I was, painting bars and clubs, bands, dancing, and maybe even the next one. Many of the works from that time include my sister as my muse. This is her in a piece called Ecstasy, and she was a model in one of the earlier ones as well. John is also a model, and I could go to the next one. He's there, he's there, he's there. Modeling for many of these. This is very reminiscent, I didn't even realize it, of that the Spanish one. Anyway. So when we left school, I no longer had access to live models, and I would approach strangers and to come and model, and for some reason they agreed to come to the studio and model for me. So that, the next one, one from that era. Steve, my career.
Okay.
And so in the mid-90s, our family went through a very difficult time, and my brother was diagnosed with melanoma, and he died in 1994 at the age of 28. And so I was really struggling to respond to that. This is a scar. This is showing the scar of a young woman who survived melanoma. And then the next one, with apologies for the quality of the documentation. This is a piece from 1994 about the grief that our family was experiencing. This is my sister and me embracing really somber colors and making an effort in the painting at least to console and comfort each other, because it was something we really couldn't do for each other in real life. So that's the end. These I wanted to show you from that period, and I did put painting aside for a period of time. Job, life, family, all sorts of good reasons. But so now I'm bringing you into the newer work. So my current work, it's still I'm still painting people. Now my subjects are more personal, and I find that that spending time with a portrait, painting someone is such an intimate process, and I want to spend that time with people that are meaningful to me. And so my subjects are now my family. This is my uncle Dieter. I'm working on a series of work of my parents' generation. The next one is Bushra. I'm spending time with my friends, people who do me the honor of agreeing to be my subject, and Bushra was smiling on me as I was working on this piece, giving me encouragement to come back to my work. And then the next one, so I'm also painting the young people in my life, my daughter growing into a beautiful young woman, and my niece Kiara in this piece with Ode to Hamilton in the background. And so for the show here, I was thinking about painting my elders, and I decided instead, thinking about this must be the place, about painting my parents at the moment when they were young and met here in Hamilton, young immigrants. And the last, my aunt, again from that elder series. And finally, my dear friends, people who supported me, supported each other, always dear friends from work, and who helped us survive the pandemic, if I could just say that emotionally. So that's, these are my friends Mark, Faye, Amber, Caroline, and there I am in the background, socially distanced, deck party. And so just finally, I think that I'm thinking a lot about, I've always felt I had to justify the choice to paint people, to paint portraits, and I actually don't have a choice. So I've finally come to thinking about this as like spending time with people is an effort to connect, and it's an act of love. So that's all and mine. Okay. You let me know when you'd like me to switch. Yeah.
Okay, so some notes here. Okay, so the paintings that I have here are, for me, an exploration of unexpected juxtapositioning, and how I got to that, I'm really not really sure. My earliest fascination with visual art was that I was always fascinated and impressed with people who could draw and paint really well. And I made that my my lifelong pursuit, is to be able to. I wanted to learn how to draw and paint, but also I was fascinated with the way these people, these really good artists, could shock you and surprise you and startle you with their work. And I became fascinated with that, with unexpected juxtaposition, how we could startle the viewer, and by the change of imagery, change of objects involved in the image, by placing different objects that have, has its own meaning, but when it's placed together in this kind of context and framed, everything suddenly becomes, has one meaning, because it's within the same frame. And okay, so in this one I'm using, simply finding objects that I have sitting around, a rate can and a stick, and found imagery, and the intent was to make it look instantaneous, which is, it's not instantaneous because I labored over all the images, but when you look at the image, you see the sudden change from the can of Raid to the image to the stick, all these unrelated objects existing in the same space, which I hope produces a surprise factor when you come upon the image. And with these, and so this is an image where I'm still pursuing the same idea, using my easel, parts of my easel, a montage of photographs, and including cartoon-like images into the painting, and gestural marks and geometric marks existing together, including up there an image of Tiepolo's ceiling in Austria, somewhere in Vienna. I forget the name of the palace. And a continuation here of found images and drawing over top of images with, and again with marks and geometric shapes and overlapping shapes, and the resulting color that results from that. And okay, and this and the same. I'm continuing on with that, using images that I found, that I took around my house, and a tire, and framing it all together and using tape, transparent tape and cartoon imagery. And okay, this one, this is a detail from a larger work. It was sitting on crutches, and again, it's the same idea, using found objects and a shelf and cartoon-like imagery. Okay, I didn't include this one in the show. Okay, this one is a detail. This was actually sitting on a tire, which was sitting on a table, but I've since removed the tire and table and pared it down to this image, which is, I think it's still, effective, and it's zeroed in onto it. So there's there's an image in the background and overlaid with other images, and then a cartoon image and geometric shapes in the background. And
Oh, sorry.
okay, and,
Yeah.
okay, so this appears much more conventional, but I think, in my mind, I think I'm still pursuing that idea of unexpected juxtapositioning, found objects, which I use found objects around my home, tires and styrofoam heads, and I use, obviously I use myself as a model. I put it together, and I really didn't have a program for this, but the way it evolved is that it suggested Dante's Inferno. I worked at Stelco as a full-time employee for a year, and then several years as a summer student. So Stelco in the background, I worked in a coke oven, so the oven there was actually 700 ovens. So it was very much an allusion to Dante's Inferno that I thought I could mine. It's a very loose, not a strict interpretation. This is actually the first one that came to mind to me, to the illusion of Dante and Virgil descending into hell, and hell in the background, working the coke ovens truly was like a living hell on earth. And again, the same idea, found objects paired together, and so there's an element of unexpected juxtapositioning. Okay, and this is the same idea, I think, unexpected juxtapositioning with objects. This is actually done at when I taught a few classes at Sheridan College, painting and drawing, and this was a setup that I had made there, and then I modified it, and again, the same idea. This is again with the setup that I had at Sheridan College, and the setups suggested Napoleon's horse Marengo, and also the Battle of Marengo. It's not that I actually pre-thought it out, but as it came together, I thought I'd go with it. Thank you.
This is a study I did for the downtown sculpture, the injured workers memorial.
I kept that in just because it's not a good picture. Awesome. Okay.
Okay, go back.
Yeah.
Please, if you don't mind.
Yes.
To the sketch first?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, I scratched into, this is on aluminum, and I painted with black paint, and then scratched into it to do the image. I was just experimenting for my proposal for the sculpture. So the proposal was on larger pieces, of course, right? The Morski Model 4. I should say though, Paul reminded me, when we were started as contemporaries, we were young contemporaries plus one.
Minus.
Minus? Oh, pardon me.
Minus
one, yeah. Because, I'm 15 years older than everybody. So I'm honored to be included as a friend, I'm 75 years old, so I'm a happy geriatric, And I have a fabulous partner, my wife, Trishbach. Okay, so I like contrast, I like contrast in my work. So I like abstraction, and I like the organic element as well. So this is a wall piece. It's simple, very simple square or rectangle, painted, and an organic piece as well. Okay. And this is along the same Can you flip it for a sec to show the other side? So once again, this is the idea of contrast and a rectangle or square with an organic element in between. And the organic elements, Trish and I had the good fortune to teach overseas for 3 years. 2 years in Seoul, in South Korea, and a year in Japan. And I loved the calligraphy. Like, to me, just walking down the street every day was like walking through an art gallery. It was goddamn amazing, you know. So, but I could, I didn't want to learn it. I'm 70 years old, right? I can't learn Japanese. But I would make sort of my kind of calligraphy, these little drawings, scribbles, and then I would find a little composition that I thought would look good in wood, just out of all these endless scribbles. It was really kind of neat. And so that's where they came from, okay? So, and I like to paint as well. I painted sculpture. So I would paint I had a flat area to paint, and then I had an organic piece in the middle to give it space. And of course, there's we all have what would you say, meditative quality when you're working, right? It's just beautiful. It's a nice way to disengage, but in an engaged way. I don't know how else to put it. Nice. And I like the idea of, once again, empathy. It's empathy. I'm trying to be empathic, but you get frustrated. So I did on one side, I did sorry, right? And on the other side, I buried the fucks, right? So it's empathy and frustration, right? Because it's an amazing existence we live in, right? The world we live in, a beautiful world. But there's a goddamn wars in the Ukraine, Like, it's the strange contrast, Owls are beautiful birds, but they're raptors. They come and tear little chipmunks apart. So it's the strange aspect of existence. This rolling. So that's what these pieces are about. Just little meditations on life and the wheel, the great wheel. Right? That's it.
Move through Fred's pieces quickly. And do you want to talk about
2 minutes worth of quotes.
2 minutes? Yeah, that's necessary.
Yeah, so I just picked out a few quotes from a catalog that Bryce Canberra wrote and from various newspaper articles about Bilanzola. So I'm just going to read them. Paul Benedetti, a 1990 Spectator. From simple works to bigger, more complex canvases, Bilanzola uses the same clean lines, flattened planes of color, and a bright, high-key palette. His work, dense, symbolic, sometimes oddly surreal, is dramatic and thought-provoking. Bryce Canberra, 2006. We can detect the lyrical cadence of an Italian accent in Bilanzola's themes, but what he talks about is universal woe. Some of these windows we don't really want to look through. His pictures are frozen narratives that roll out a cascade of grim characters and situations. Pierre Karsh from Vides Art magazine in 1990 says, caricatures in carnival-like colors resemble the paintings of the Great Depression years. Bryce again, the generalized style of drawing and flat coloring make us think of comic book art. Despite the visual simplicity in Bilanzola's handling of his figures, they provoke our consternation about what they're doing. His paintings are easy to see, but not so easy to read. Just 2 more quotes. Bryce Canberra again. Bilanzola's paintings are as immediately gripping and can be as mysteriously unsettling as a Fellini film, or as wrenchingly disturbing as the works of German expressionists, such as George Grosz and Max Beckmann. And Jeff Mahoney's from The Spectator, 1995. The shocking images push disturbing buttons.
Yes.
We did it.
Thank you, everyone. I'm surprised and happy that the timing was so great. Thank you very much to all the contemporaries for your talks and your thoughts on your work. Thank you so much. And we have some time after. We're going to wrap up the talks now. But the exhibition is open, and if you have some conversation, some art conversation, or thoughts or comments, please, you're welcome to speak to the artists, and they're here, so it's a great opportunity. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Good.